coming together with a very audaciously named Pro Talk, the last of this year, called Breaking Barriers and Overcoming Biases, Unveiling Challenges in Casting. I'm Stacy Clark, the CEO of CircusTalk. I'm a white cis woman in my 50s with a birthday coming up, 54. Woot. I have a medium sporty build. I have long blonde hair. I'm wearing glasses and a blue shirt today. And my pronouns are she, her. Joining me for today's Pro Talk is Veronica Blair, aerial performer, independent director and choreographer, and a creative consultant. I'm now going to ask Veronica to dive in a little bit more about herself in her own words. But I would like to just reiterate that this Pro Talk is designed to open a conversation, continue a conversation, provoke conversation about equitable casting. That's a big word. It's a big subject. We might call it inclusive casting, diversity casting. Let's just talk about it and take the veil off. That's really the main objective today. Veronica, over to you.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you for having me. Well, my name is Veronica Blair. I'm a medium brown skin Black woman with long black / dark brown hair. I have on a simple black shirt with long sleeves, gold earrings, and my background is a white wall with a bit of a kind of a leaf motif spread across on top of the white wall. My pronouns are she, hers, and yeah, I'm just happy to be here. That's my description.
Well, we're delighted to have you. And Veronica and I chatted we've had the pleasure of being in touch previously, most recently in September at a different event and on a couple of other occasions as well. And, this is big. I'm not going to pretend like I can handle it, quite frankly. I don't think any single person can. I think it's really about being willing to talk about it, figure things out, come up with some proactive initiative-taking solutions to try to do better in an industry that admittedly tends to represent people who look a little bit more like me on stage in a lot of circus productions as compared to our guest today. And there's so many reasons behind that, and some we can get behind and some perhaps we cannot. So with that, I have a couple of very big overarching questions, and we're going to try to talk them through largely through the lens of Veronica's own experiences. So keeping it real, keeping it about the kinds of things that you indeed, Veronica, have experienced for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. So one of those big questions for everybody in the room is, as an industry, how do we ensure that a broader range of performers, including those from underrepresented or historically marginalized groups, have opportunities to portray a variety of roles on stage? It's big. It's a big question.
Big question. I just want to answer that question, starting off by giving a little bit of my history. I am from San Francisco, and San Francisco has a long, long history of circus and diversity, or being inclusive of everyone is just a part of the culture. So it's never been a thing where, as a youngster, not thinking about circus as a career or anything like that, going to the parks, going to the local theaters and seeing circus, there was always people of color. There was always a large range of inclusivity, whether it was display of different cultures and honoring of different cultures, celebration of different cultures, or whether that was represented. When we talk about diversity, we tend to talk about skin color. So that was something that I was quite used to seeing. And in coming up as a preteen, a tween, I guess they call it, a teenager, and then ultimately a young woman in the San Francisco circus scene, I was never really the only person of color around me. So I experienced a great deal of diversity and inclusiveness when I was coming up in circus and when I was training in circus. And so it was noticeable for me at a younger age that is not what the I wouldn't say nationally, because North America and the US, there's a the circus is very diverse, very inclusive. We border with Mexico, of course, and South America, and so we tend to have a lot more performances and acts from Colombia, from Brazil, from the Caribbean, things like that. But internationally, going abroad, I didn't see or experience or interact with a lot of performers that had similar skin tone to me. So that in the microcosm of San Francisco, I had one experience. But as I grew in my career and became professional, I realized that that wasn't really what the world of circus looked like. So I just wanted to share that. I think that the first thing in terms of like really beginning to look at this topic, this subject, I don't really want to call it a problem, because when you call something a problem, then that creates a lot of static, and people begin to think with their stressor brain, the brain that is stressed out. But the thing with addressing this topic is to get rid of words like underrepresented and marginalized. I do think that there is a minority majority in the world population. But I do think that within that same vein, I think there's a lot of things that I'm going to be careful how I say this, but there's a lot of things about in terms of celebrating the cultures of others, and looking at a different skin tone or a different physicality of someone, different physical attributes, and deeming them as beautiful is not commonly done or accepted within certain sections of the entertainment industry. I hope I said that in a way that everyone could understand. And so, while we do the world is very diverse, and we have all of these different cultures that have beautiful pageants and dances, and people have different beautiful physical attributes on the world stage, television, film, live entertainment. These are not things that normally cross over into that realm. And so when we put words like underrepresented or marginalized on this topic, it kind of stresses people out a little bit. It makes folks that are people of color feel like they are a minority, essentially, which is a word that's been used throughout my whole life. And it makes the topic seem more difficult, and like answering the questions or creating solutions within this topic. It makes it seem like it's nearly impossible, because we're talking about a minority group. So I think that those buzzwords are not necessarily harmful, but I think that at this point, if we can move to a space where we're talking about, we could even say like, how can we have a more inclusive casting. So so that's another piece on mine of that. And then the third piece of that is, there's a lot of pressure. When we talk about casting, we're using one word. Casting falls on anywhere from 1 to 2 to a group of a small team of folks, right? A lot of pressure, right? So whatever a company is casting for, that instruction, that description has come down a long chain, and it is placed on the shoulders of a few people to execute. And so I think before we even dive deep into that, we need to actually humanize the people that are involved in casting, because a lot of the times, I would say, and this is my personal opinion, I feel like a lot of the times people that are in casting, or they land in that role for large companies, any size of company, they don't necessarily have the experience under their belt. And they don't have the experience under their belt. They're not equipped to handle such a large job. And I say that because essentially people that are working in casting casting directors are put in that position to discern and to hire people based on a description that is not their own. And it is part of their job to fill that description of what the director, of what the artistic director, whatever the show is called for, what they want to see on stage. So we need to also, I guess, with all that being said, we need to just humanize the folks and the people that are involved in this situation. So I've been rambling quite a bit.
No, this is great because there's a few things I'd love to circle back to, and I'll do it in reverse order.
Yeah.
Well, it's no big surprise maybe that I'm also a casting director. And so I actually really appreciate your perspective on that from the standpoint of this chain of the process of show making. And that you're right, it's a collaborative process in a good situation. And there are occasions where it's really fulfilling a pre-existing role description or profile description that is very much outside that active person's hands, that casting responsible person's hands. With that said, I'm sort of interested in the models that might put a little bit more weight on their shoulders in the best sense, in order that they can push back up the chain. This is something that I think is a little bit lacking sometimes in companies, just accepting it as the norm, the okay, by virtue of what that power balance or hierarchy is. I'd love to see personally more fluidity in that, because oftentimes the casting folks are the human ones, the ones that are out there in service of the artists, really want to do better and do feel sometimes a little bit pigeonholed. I can speak more specifically. I have felt that in the past, a little bit pigeonholed by something that is pre-described or preordained as what I need to go find. What I'd like to do, and I also very much appreciate you highlighting language, because I very specifically mentioned the notion of underrepresentation or marginalized. So if we are going to not use those buzzwords, as you refer to, how then can we have the level of recognition that's necessary to know that there is an imbalance perhaps, but appropriately move forward with as inclusive as possible language? What are those words? What are those words, simply?
I mean, it literally just, it's just in the wording of and again, I want to say this because I just want to take any stigma, any kind of prompts that would cause people to stress out. I think they're better if they're just, and I think originally when these terms were created and used, I don't think that they came from a place of we want to make people feel othered. I think they came from a real place of like, how do we describe this, right? But I think that just it's done, and it's like just acknowledging it, right? Hey, like we noticed that, over the years, we haven't done a really good job at reflecting the folks that come and see our show, or we don't actually have a show that is for this particular market. How can we reflect the audience that will be attending our shows, or how can we just finding other ways to articulate what the idea is, essentially, I want to say. So it's in the description, like casting descriptions. I was very fortunate to be circus consultant on a show that's going to premiere on Broadway next year. And a lot of the work that was done before casting was everybody join these Zoom links, and we're going to hear from, because the show is based around circus, is we're going to hear from experts. We're going to hear from little people. We're going to hear from folks with disabilities, and we're going to learn how they represent themselves, and what words they use, and how they would prefer to articulate their things. So it's like going to the source, taking away the stigma and the stress about like the problem, but actually putting a human face to the situation, to the things, and going straight to the source and getting the answers. I do believe that the work that was done pre-casting for this show, for example, was very beneficial. And there was lots of questions being asked before they went out. The casting was pretty open. But it was a thing like, well, if we cast, for example, an Asian person in this role, wouldn't it kind of look like X, Y, and Z stereotype that we know for a fact doesn't play over well with this community? So there was a lot of smart, I would call it smart conversation had around the casting before it even happened. And there was a lot of just work and thinking put into it. And I think that the result, what came out on the other end was very successful because of it. But
I'm
again,
hearing the key word, which is work. The work was put in,
yeah,
but really truly, like no sort of assumptions or jumping to automatic defaults or conclusions, but as you say, smart conversation and the actual time and effort put in to be able to move forward in an informed way. That's work.
yeah.
Nice.
Because those workshops were long, but they were very insightful. And I think for me personally, I can't speak for everyone on the creative team, but it provided a bit of relief. And I keep talking about stress. I feel like people get stressed when we bring up these topics, right? But going straight to the source, there's tons of folks out there that have created PowerPoint presentations and workshops and things like that. And yeah, you do have to call around and it's word of mouth, but these people do exist and they will educate you on their community and give you resources, and it's really cool. Like, I think a lot of great stuff came, I would say, specifically from the theater community, because they've been at this for a long time. And so I would also say that they are right now at this point, they are kind of leading the charge when it comes to more inclusive open casting, developing the text, developing the wording for what they're casting for and being very specific about it.
I have a question about that as it relates back to the broader community and the good intentions that many people have. Those same people who may not be fully equipped or tooled to improve or do better. Do you think those kinds of resources, the outcomes of that very work that was put in, would they be shared? Would that be something that could become a new bar, essentially, a new basis from which more people could work?
Mhm, mhm. I think so. I really do think so. Especially if companies in general are just sharing their resources, or just even having a 2 to 3 sentence paragraph about their commitment to casting, and what their commitment to, how they're going to present their show. I think that would be actually pretty cool. And the sharing of resources, which then employs the folks that are doing the work and spreading their work and spreading their name across different realms and different sections of entertainment. I think that's a good idea.
So that's one of our little takeaways so far, is how do we create some kind of mechanism, the construct, to be able to share the learnings and genuinely create the resources that allow people to then grow in the right direction. And to your point, using the very people who should be at the table, having access and reference to the
Right.
consultants, the experts, the folks who've come from that place, who can
Right.
really shine the right color light on it all.
Right. It's super helpful, and it actually really brings me to this point. I'm going to kind of digress a tiny bit, but it's in the same vein of this show. And it is a topic, because I don't know if the folks creative team or folks in casting don't realize that we have noticed that there's a holiday show that originally, in our industry, in circus industry, that originally casted um or the image of the show was a young Black girl, and she had Afro puffs, and actually she was an adult, very beautiful adult, but she could pass as a young girl. Um, and that show went out the first year. Pandemic happened. The show came back. The image of the young girl changed to an actual young girl, little Black girl, a girl of African descent, and it seemed as though they had some issues with casting this person in the show. That casting, finding a person of a woman, a Black woman of I'm like scrambling my words, a woman of African descent to fill this role as a main character. And so that became very apparent when a few folks in the industry would go to visit the show, and there was a person on stage that did not reflect the image that was being marketed. And then to, so there's a lot of questions around that. And to further, I would say personally, to add insult to injury, as the show expands, it seems as though this character, this young Black character, is being switched out to a white presenting character, probably because it is easier to cast. And if you have been in the industry for a long time, and there's so many different ways the reason for this can go, but ultimately, bottom line, it is, and this is where I'm going to digress a little bit, it is the lack of follow-up that is really making the situation come across as a negative situation. So if you start off at point A, we're going to create this show, we're going to have a Black protagonist, young girl. And this is something that we rarely see in our industry. It's a big deal, and people are paying attention. And so when you, over the years, begin to phase that out, and we see a new image of the same show, which has been repeated for about 3 years, and the image has changed, it can be perceived negatively. And so when we talk about casting in this sense, it actually has nothing to do with the folks casting. I mean, it could have something to do with the feedback, right? We're going out, we're looking for a young Black woman to play the main character of this show, but we can't find any Black women, and that's the typical story that we hear, even though there's a lot of Black women or people of African descent that can indeed, in fact, play that role and represent that character. But the folks in casting, maybe they're having a hard time casting. And maybe the folks at the top that have designed this show in a very specific way originally, they're having a hard time changing their vision. And so in the meantime, that character is being phased out to something that is easily castable. So
you're hitting on something incredibly pertinent here,
mhm.
whether it's perception or reality, or an interesting myriad of all versions of that.
Mhm.
Where's the bridge? If indeed, because I'm hearing a version of this which is cop out, let's sort of go to the lowest hanging fruit, and something that would prove to be a little bit more but arguably simpler. I don't know what that situation is, but
Yeah.
if we're going to look at it through the lens of, was it actually artistic integrity and a choice at an artistic level to make a change, or indeed was it trying to find a solution that just felt simpler? Being sort of the key verb piece, because we need a bridge between those two things. If there is available talent that is appropriate for that role, and the casting responsible is unable to connect with them, how do we build the bridge? That for me feels like the piece of construction that's missing.
Mm-hmm. And also, it's also a thing of like, yeah, we started here. This was the intention with this protagonist, with this main character role. We want to like making the decision to be committed to it. to be committed to it, like be constantly searching um, for folks that could potentially play that role if it is in fact difficult. Casting a wider net if it is in fact on the casting side difficult to cast that role. And then if it's not, if there isn't any bodies or folks that really can either play that role or character wise, or they don't have the skills, the person that created allowing that space for a change. Okay, well, we can't find a person of African descent. We can't find a Black woman to play this role and perform a large act for the show. But we started here in A, and we've marketed this show with a young Black female protagonist. We need to keep that. We need to have some integrity and keep that. Let's change the story a little bit. Maybe she
Mm.
doesn't have to do this performance,
Or
but
the
it is important.
expectations, exactly.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
But it is important for us to have the integrity and keep that character, because that's important to our audience and that's important in the industry. And that is, I mean, how the show was essentially built, and it's like when you go to the show anyway, the protagonist, her father is white presenting. So maybe this character is a biracial character, it kind of doesn't really matter. But originally it started off one way and we're watching it change. So this idea of the bridge is like, I guess this could be a bridge that splits. Like it could go two
Mm.
ways, it could go back up the chain to the creative team, but these are really, really important things, like we see that, and the folks that saw the show originally and are bringing their young Black kids to the show expecting to see, themselves represented on stage. They might get a shock if they come, if the the, the young girl on the poster is not actually reflected in the show, So
I think that concept of show integrity is super interesting, aligned with artistic vision. And I
mhm,
feel like it's tapping in a little bit to what my aspiration would be about pushing it back up the chain. If there needs to be some kind of readjustment or choices made, how do we not make the same choice every time and lean into the one that ultimately could be quite harmful, or letting go, as you say, sort of that lack of follow-up or lack of commitment, a few iterations down the path?
mhm,
At what cost? There's a whole other sort of quiet cost as compared to what are the performative expectations of the person filling that role. Could we recalibrate that instead and have it be a stronger commitment to the character portrayal versus the
mhm,
acrobatic execution? Veronica,
exactly.
I would love for you to talk to some of the people in the room, and because an hour just flies by, I'm going to take a minute here and just invite folks to pop back up on screen and immerse yourself, get engaged with us. And I don't, I think Veronica is incredibly brilliant and well equipped to dialogue with all of you. So if you've got something, please bring it. We're going to use the little Zoom hands so that I can be somewhat organized. And I would also invite you to go into the chat, which will sort of keep an eyeball on. And there is, in fact, already some stuff in there. So I would invite the individual who put a few questions into the chat to kick us off, since you have some stuff that's clearly front of mind. Are you in a position to come on camera? I'm actually not able to find you currently. Are you still here? Maybe that's why. Okay.
Yeah.
Had to go. So I do have some things in the chat that I will perhaps use as a point of departure, and then we're going to go right into the room. So first question was, how do the folks who have not been represented or heard get a seat at the table to make change? Great question. It's exactly what we were talking about.
I think that is that question, Stacy. Do you think it's geared more to how do we get more people of color in casting positions? Is that what the question is? Can you?
Yes, I believe that's the perspective it's coming from. I can't say for sure, but I'm guessing that that's what this individual meant, because I'll go on to read the next piece. When
Mhm.
folks are silenced or unheard long enough, it becomes, in parentheses, artistically unsafe to speak up. So how do the
Mhm.
gatekeepers step up to their responsibility to make it safe to speak up when there is nothing that compels them to move out of their comfort zone?
Mhm.
Yes, I see part 3. I didn't get to that part. This person did have to leave, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
will be back with us for the recording. So maybe we can talk about that. I think this again is sort of a different version of the bridge.
Right. Uh, okay. I'm gonna ask the answer the last one. My opinion is that it is very difficult for folks that work in casting to provide a safe space for people to come in and be heard. If we're talking about showing up as at a casting with a large amount of people, it is, I wouldn't say that it is impossible, but I would also say that it's not fair to put that on the shoulders of the person that is casting for a show if you're walking into an audition. I think that they, in terms of being heard, I do think that I think that in general, casting directors, people that work in casting, their email addresses, they're out there. Um, and it could just be as simple as writing an email to them. Will they respond? Um, who knows? But I do think that as an artist in general, it is our jobs to, we go to an audition and we don't quite make it through, is to approach the casting director after the room is cleared, when it is, not stressful to do so, and say, hey, I just got cut from this audition. Can you please give me feedback? And to ask questions. And I find that most people are willing to give you feedback. Um, but in general, that's probably a place where we need to build another bridge, as Stacy said earlier, to where there can be an exchange between people that are auditioning and folks in casting. I think that that's another one of your pro talks, Stacy. Whether there's kind of like a town hall. And then I think in terms of people of color, like kind of going to the other side of the table, so to speak, or to work their way through casting, I think there needs to be a desire to do that. Once you have been performing in the industry, any industry, actually long enough, you do, if you want to stick with it, you do have that opportunity to cross and go to the other side of the table and work in casting and work in creative and production. But it's all about how you line up your career.
Mm.
If that's where if being on stage is enough for you, then, and you want to retire after that, that's fine. But if being on stage is not enough and you want to keep working in your industry, or you want to implement change and be a change maker in your industry, the next logical step is to go and pursue, um, go to upper management and express interest in coaching, express interest in casting, and see what the steps that you need to take to be able to make it to that realm, because it is important. It is important to have representation across the board, but I just think that I don't think that everybody is naturally drawn to those types of jobs. They have to really have a passion for it. So
And
that.
it is, I think, again, a certain amount of two-way streetness in it, in that there needs to be the sense of safety going into that space to express that interest, to express that desire, to really
Mhm.
put the effort into to step
Right.
into something that might not feel, even if it's not necessarily true, it may not feel as welcoming as it needs to. And so I do feel that it's a shared responsibility across all levels, all platforms, all individuals.
Mhm. Definitely. Um, I definitely agree. I think it just, okay, when we think about these things, we tend to get stressed, or we feel a little bit uncomfortable when we see someone approaching us that we're not familiar with, like someone, because we're dealing with unconscious biases quite a bit. We all have them. I'm seeing, you know, a large Bulgarian man approach me. You know, I might feel, you know, uncomfortable, right? Like just off the bat until we start engaging in a conversation. And the same thing might be, the same experience might be had on the other side of the coin, just based on lack of interaction, right? But it just takes a lot of audacity on everyone's part to just be like, this is where I'm trying to be. So I'm going to make the effort uh, to get where I need to go, to ask the appropriate questions to the right people. And, you know, it just takes a lot of audacity. I just, it takes a lot of audacity to stay in any career path for 20 years, especially the circus industry, especially the entertainment industry. And um, I can only speak for myself when I say I've just always just kind of taken my pride, or I'm not saying that people are prideful, but I've kind of just like taken that thing, that block that would prevent me from approaching or from me conversating. I've had to take that and set it aside. Even if I felt someone's energy, if I felt someone's energy be like, don't approach me or whatever, I'm like, okay, I feel that coming from you, but I'm gonna take my stuff, I'm gonna put it over here, and I'm going to approach. Yeah, so it just takes a lot of audacity. You know,
Yeah, it's
we're dealing with
courage.
humans here. We're dealing with humans, so
Yeah, it's courage. And I think that is true of whatever skin color uh, envelopes you. We're humans at the center. And I think it does take courage in a lot of cases to be able to step into those arenas and to have a voice. But I love this notion of the continuum. This is what is needed to really have that representation be evident across the entire chain.
mhm.
So I'm welcoming hands. I'm sort of, we will kind of chit chat and gab forever, but if there are folks who want to bring their voice to this, please just pop your little Zoom hand up, or if that for some reason is not as convenient or welcoming for you because of Zoom, then just do that with your real hand and we'll still see it. So whatever you need to do to make yourselves known, make a signal. We're happy to hear from any one of you. Any folks. There's always a sort of a crickets moment there where things are just like duck, duck, duck while people either formulate. There we go. Okay, thank you. And it's beautiful. Zoom puts you right up into the corner so that I can't miss you. Okay, Joseph, please join us.
It's funny because I did that. Everything that Veronica just said, I did.
Mhm.
I stopped performing and I moved into the casting world, and I'm a person of color. Here we are. I'm now a gatekeeper. It wasn't easy. Power isn't seceded, it's taken. And what people fail to realize a lot of the time is that above people are more people. And the people that are above them are above them. And so there's a board. And a lot of the time the boards make decisions that cannot be changed because they're in charge of the company. And people don't understand that a lot of the time. And it's not a lack of information, it's just not really put out there for, especially for performers. We don't know that there's layers upon layers of organizational power that's set, but you have to just put yourself out there. And as someone who has done that, I can tell that my presence in the room has changed a lot, especially for these actors in Washington, D.C., where I'm located. As soon as they come in, if a performer of color comes in the room and they see me, they are already put at ease, especially if the rest of the table doesn't look like them. I'm the one that has to do all the introductions, and it is my responsibility, and I like to take that responsibility to invite people into the room, to make it warm, because if they're not invited, they won't do their best. And we want people to do their best because we want our jobs to be easier. We want to pick the good people. It has made a difference, I've found, but it's also the people up top have to recognize that change has to happen. And if it's not happening, maybe it's because they don't want the change to happen. And that has to be said. there have been some conversations I've had with directors who Veronica has said, which is true, they ultimately make the decisions of what they want for their show. And sometimes I tell them, you know, there's no problem with having your cast be all white, you know, there's no problem with that, but you have to realize it's not a default, it's a choice, and you're choosing that. And with that choice comes responsibility. It's not my responsibility, it's going to be theirs. And it will be talked about because we live in a world where that topic is brought up all the time. And they have to deal with the responsibility. And, you know, it hasn't really happened here where I work. If it does, I would question if I want to put my name on the project, because I say things. I mean, Stacy, you've known me, Veronica, you've known me. I say things, which is also where I've gotten to, how I've gotten to where I am. Because if you don't say things, nothing happens. You know, change happens because you want it to. The world is different now than it was 4 years ago. People say things now and are listened to. Well, hopefully they are. But in order for change to happen, the gatekeepers need to change. And people should want the gatekeepers to change. And if they don't, that tells you something. With Veronica's point to the little girl being changed over time, there's the reason that has been used a lot. And, you know, circus is very specific, different than acting and performing in theater, which is what I deal with now. I get that circus is more difficult to cast because it is skill sets and very specific things that you need. If you need a discipline, it needs to be this, 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 and this. But I've also done circus casting. What I found is that you want who you want. And if you want that, you'll go get it. You will do the research to find, you will dig through Instagram, you will ask friends, you will go into the communities and try to find these people, and you will find them. And if you say you're not finding them, maybe you're not looking hard enough, because I found them.
Or not looking in the right places, which is a little piece of, it's like an add-on to what I fully agree with in what you're saying, which is where I think the resources, the concept of more shared resources starts to make available pathways that are just simply unknown. I don't like it that they're not known, but it's not intentional all the time. So this idea, I love your comment about default versus design, you know, by design. And when we have a space in the middle where the by design is related to not working hard enough to find what really was intended, that's where the resources need to be there to support and to help push the ball down the field.
And one more thing that I'm going to say before I shut up, because I talk a lot. In terms of the resources, no one really has an excuse anymore because social media exists and everyone's on social media, and you can go on Instagram and find anybody and connect with them immediately. I have found many artists through Instagram and other social media platforms. Everyone has this now. No one has an excuse anymore that you can't find what you need because it's all there.
It's a really fair point, and I would extend on that and invite you all to use CircusTalk as a platform in a similar fashion. This is a small plug, but we do have a new section for consultants. And if you feel like the individual who had to leave earlier, that you would like a voice at the table, make it known. It sort of goes back to that courage and that audacity of stepping up and using your voice. We have a platform where you can make it known that you are ready to be that person.
Definitely. I just thank you, Joe, for everything that you said, because people do, we talk about integrity in casting, and it really brought up this situation with a casting for Lion King in a Disney park. And this was a casting for a duo, which last year I was minding my business, but a dear friend and colleague, I saw that they were commenting on something that had to do with this white presenting woman wearing a darker unitard, probably a little bit darker than me actually, but it was very obvious that this actually was a duo, white presenting man, male and female, and they had on these costumes that were obviously intended for a person of color to wear, and it was a part of a Lion King show. And I think that as people do on the, it was pointed out in the video on Instagram, and it began this huge topic of like, okay, well, what is this? You know, like the show Lion King on Broadway has existed for years. We know what the typical people that are in the industry and they in the know knows, they know what the typical casting for a Lion King production is. So why is it that here in this space, in this particular production for a large theme park, why is it that there aren't people of color? Why isn't there a person of African descent in this role? What happened in casting where you have two white presenting people wearing leotards, full body leotards that are obviously intended and were created for somebody, for a body to be filled by a body from a person of color. So that that expanded quite a bit. And I remember I was working on an install at that moment. I would just happen to be sitting in the wardrobe because everybody hangs out in wardrobe. Doesn't matter what show you're on. It's just a safe place. And so I was looking at the photos and the videos of this young woman, and she was so excited about her job, but her costume did not match her skin tone. And I just turned it to the head of wardrobe and I said, is this acceptable? Like, she was like, no, I mean, this is obviously cast for not this person, you know, and it had, you know, kind of locks. The headpiece was kind of a locks. And so I'm just using colorful language to paint a picture for you guys. But long story short, a dear friend and colleague of mine decided that she would say something. And so she figured out who the person responsible for this casting was. She wrote an email saying, basically, I'm paraphrasing that, you know, this is unacceptable. This is Lion King. These roles are like typically played by people of African descent, black folks, and it's unacceptable that you are casting, you know, white presenting folks in this role. The costume, it doesn't even honor this person's skin color. Like, it just is a bad casting, essentially. And the response that she got was, well, I no longer cast for that, but this person still does cast for this show. And whether they're making more of an effort to cast people that are appropriate for this production, Lion King, darker tone unitards, we don't know, but people are paying attention. And not a lot of people are speaking up. Not a lot of people have the courage to speak up, but you know, just like the other show with the slow phasing out of this young Black character, it's like we actually are paying attention and we are talking about it, even if it is just amongst ourselves. And so it's really, again, it goes back to keeping the integrity. And yeah, everyone has smartphones. I'm on my smartphone right now communicating with all of you guys. Like, we have access to a microcosm of the world at this point. And I think there needs to be a little bit more focus on integrity. There aren't a lot of roles that are created for people of color to come in and that continually be casted for years and years and years. And so when we do have those roles, it's like integrity is super important.
Yeah, you're really tapping into I think the complexity of circus as it relates to the skill set, which Joe also touched on. This idea of having the predetermined notion of what the acrobatic or artistic or fusion thereof deliverable looks like, and then by extension, who can do that in that way, through that aesthetic, through that lens, as designed by the creator. Somewhere in there, I feel like we need to reverse engineer it and start taking a look at the idea of what are the stories being told, what are the narratives, who are the characters being designed, and upon which model. you've touched on it a couple times, Veronica, the source. I love
Mhm,
this notion of building work from the source. And I
mhm,
feel like that's something that's been very much part of your career and your portfolio. Uh,
mhm.
Intentional work, simply, as compared to preordained, this is what this is, and now go fill it with said profile, said body.
Right. Right. It's and in that sense of that casting, that was kind of, I would say it was quite a shame. I think anyone can be trained within a month if they already have acrobatic or aerial ability to do web, to be quite honest. So there's just certain skills and certain roles that there definitely are people of African descent, Black people that can fill those roles. Again, I think it's just people need to cast a wider net, to get on their phones, or to, to ask around. So I do think that some of it is trainability. Like, is this person trainable? The aesthetic that I have in mind, is that a traditional aesthetic for this body type, or for this body of people? Is that real for them? Is that, or is that something, is that my own personal aesthetic or choice? So, and that's, we're not going to open that can of worms. But it's still like such a large conversation to be had here. But it's just like creating work that is intentional. And people do ask me a lot about the type of work that I make. Like, for example, the Rainbow is Enough was created. It's a cast of, originally it was a cast of 6 women of African descent. Excuse me, 5 women of African descent, 1 transgender, transmasculine person. And now we've expanded a little bit. So I would say that our show features people of color. This was done because, I mean, when we talk about intention, the show was created by Black women, my colleagues, now dear friends. And the impetus, the origin story of how this show was created was just that, just like you would create any show or small company, right? It just so happens that the people that are in my world, in my universe, are people of color, that I find to be very beautiful and talented. So um, there is that, but also the source material was written by an African American woman, and it features the story of women of color. And so we needed to keep integrity. We needed to keep some form of integrity when it came to honoring this work, because the Rainbow, while it isn't directly derived from our source material, it is inspired by. And so being intentional in that way is really holding. Like, I couldn't, if God forbid one day one of the cast members couldn't do the show, I wouldn't think to cast a white presenting person in that role, just because for the integrity of the show, that would pose a lot of questions. And then people would be talking about me on CircusTalk, Pro Talk, like, well, Veronica did this show. But it's just about keeping the integrity that doesn't, and I work on a few other different shows, but for this one, we have to keep that integrity. And for me, it's just as simple as that. Or people ask me questions about, I did a piece, I was hired, excuse me, by Kareem Jackson to be artistic director on a project and execute his vision. And that is just telling the story of 2 Black men having a healthy, loving relationship. Two very masculine presenting Black men having a romantic, beautiful, healthy relationship where they're uplifting each other. And for me, as somebody, a budding director, that's exciting for me. And so I need to listen to what Kareem's vision is, and pay attention to his budget and look at his resources and execute as well as I can based on all of those things, his vision. And yeah, it does in the end result is, wow, we haven't seen anything like that. But that's the whole point, is that these things do exist. There are these loving relationships. There are these fabulous Black men, aerialist acrobats that have a lot to say, and that are artistic, and that are beautiful. And look, here they are. So yeah, I think, yeah, I forget where I was going with this, but it's really just having intention and keeping within that the integrity of whatever projects that you're working on. I think that that's
Staying
really
true.
important. Yeah, staying true. Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's like my work makes a statement now in the industry because um the work that I'm doing for me is not unnatural for me. I'm not trying to make a statement, but it makes a statement because people are like, "Oh, I never thought of that before," or "Oh, I didn't know that could be done," or "Oh, I didn't know there were Black jugglers," you know, and it's like, well, in my world, they've always been there, you know. So I think that's why my work makes a statement, but that's never my intention when I'm working with artists of color.
Which is actually a really important ingredient to honor authenticity, because if in fact the intention is to make a statement, you've sort of missed a good piece of the point. You're, you're working and as a consequence, you're getting the results of making a difference and having impact, but that's not actually the high level goal that you set out with at the expense of all the important content along the way.
Yeah, definitely.
Folks, I need to interject because we're at this 1 hour mark, which, every time I think, really, why aren't these like a half day? Because we could just sort of chat. And I didn't see lots and lots of hands go up, which I'm really okay with, but I also don't want to silence anyone who was maybe just a little bit more shy. What I would say, perhaps just in honor of all of your time and particularly Veronica's time, because Veronica has a busy day ahead, as we talked about early this morning. Last call, anything that is front of mind, pressing, burning, that you'd like to bring to the table in this forum, because part 2 of my sentence is, if there's something to pursue afterwards in written form by email, please feel welcome. And what I would invite you to do is, if you don't already know Veronica and have the means to engage in that dialogue, then I will happily channel that through. So come to us at CircusTalk if there's anything undone, and we can make sure that this isn't just a one and done. So last call, as promised. Anything? Thank you all. I know it's a lot to sort of take in, so I'm so grateful that you're here. I think the fact that for those of you who are in the room with us and then later on watching the recording, that action, that effort that you're making is very much part of this bridge building that we're discussing. So I'd love it to keep going, both in conversation, but more importantly, in action. Tangible action, behaviors, having a voice, stepping into the arena, stepping up to the table, all of it. Veronica, anything that you wish to leave us with?
No, just thank you everybody for coming. Thank you for everybody that's going to catch this after. And again, like Stacy said, if you have any questions or you want to just share your story, yeah, just contact us. And I love to hear stories too, but so just reach out.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. This has been the final Pro Talk of this year. We will, as always, be in touch with you through all the mediums of the platform. Thanks for being with us. We really appreciate you. We appreciate our membership an awful lot. And again, we want to hear from you. So let's keep it going. Thank you, everyone.